I realized I'd been set up the moment I saw my wife's hand brush against our therapist's thigh under the coffee table, an intimate gesture she hadn't shown me in years. In that split second, every breakthrough we'd had over 6 months of sessions suddenly made perfect, horrifying sense. "Michael, you're projecting again," Dr. Harmon said with practiced concern, his notebook balanced on his knee, his wedding ring conspicuously absent today. "These paranoid ideations we've been discussing are precisely why Karen suggested therapy." "In the first place," Karen nodded, her eyes filled with rehearsed sympathy that didn't quite mask the triumph underneath. "It's okay, honey. We're here to help you work through these delusions." I almost laughed. My software company had just cleared $40 million in our latest valuation, and suddenly my wife of 7 years was deeply concerned about my mental health. How convenient. "Of course," I said, smiling as I pressed the record button on my phone. In my pocket. "Please continue explaining my delusions to me, Dr. Harmon, or should I call you David? That's what Karen calls you when you're fucking her in our bed while I'm at the office, isn't it?" Their faces told me everything I needed to know. It had started innocently enough 8 months earlier. Karen had approached me one night after dinner, her voice soft with concern that I now recognize was entirely manufactured. "Michael, I think we should try couples therapy," she'd said, her hand resting on mine in a rare display of affection. "We've been drifting apart, and with the company taking so much of your time, I'm worried about us." I'd felt a pang of guilt. She wasn't wrong about the distance between us. Building a tech startup from the ground up had consumed me for the past 3 years. Our sex life had dwindled to occasional perfunctory encounters. Our conversations had become logistical rather than intimate. When had I last asked about her photography projects or the novel she'd been working on? "You're right," I admitted. "I've been neglecting our marriage." Relief flooded her features. "I found someone highly recommended. Dr. David Harmon. He specializes in couples dealing with career-driven imbalance." I now wonder if she'd managed to suppress a smile at how easily I'd agreed. The first few sessions had seemed productive. Dr. Harmon was in his early 40s, attractive in that polished professional way, with salt and pepper hair and designer glasses that screamed successful practice. He facilitated conversations between Karen and me that we hadn't had in years. I found myself opening up about the pressure I felt as the company's founder, the anxiety that kept me working 18-hour days, the fear of failure that drove me. Karen, for her part, shared her loneliness, her frustration with my emotional absence, her unfulfilled desires both in and out of the bedroom. Dr. Harmon nodded sympathetically, jotting notes and occasionally steering us toward what he called productive vulnerability. By our 4th session, he'd suggested individual sessions to dig deeper into our personal issues before reconnecting as a couple. Again, I'd agreed without hesitation. I was seeing results. Karen seemed happier, more affectionate. We'd started having sex again, not with the raw passion of our early years, but with a rediscovered tenderness that felt like progress. If I'd been less consumed with the company's upcoming Series B funding round, perhaps I would have noticed sooner. The late-night texts she quickly hid when I entered the room. The fresh lingerie I never saw her wear. The therapy sessions that sometimes ran long, leaving her flushed and slightly disheveled when she returned home. Instead, I'd thrown myself into the therapeutic process, determined to save my marriage while securing my company's future. During my individual sessions, Dr. Harmon had begun focusing intensely on what he called my control issues and periodic detachment from reality due to stress. "Tell me about your childhood fears, Michael," he'd say, steering me away from my actual concerns about the marriage and toward increasingly personal territory. "I'm not sure how my fear of swimming after watching Jaws as a kid relates to my marriage," I'd countered during one session. "These early traumas shape our perception of threat," he'd explained smoothly. "Your tendency to see dangers where none exist may be affecting how you view Karen's innocent behaviors." In retrospect, he'd been carefully building a narrative session by session, and I'd been paying $300 an hour for the privilege. It was in our 6th month of therapy that I began noticing the discrepancies. Karen would reference conversations from Dr. Harmon's sessions that I hadn't shared with her. Small details about his office changed between my Tuesday appointments and our joint Thursday sessions. A photo moved, books rearranged, as if someone else had been there in between. Then there was the scent. Karen's distinctive perfume lingering in his office when I arrived for my individual session, though her appointment had supposedly been the day before. I might have confronted her immediately, but the investor negotiations had reached a critical stage. We were days away from closing the funding round that would either launch the company into the stratosphere or sink it entirely. So I did what any suspicious husband with too much at stake would do. I hired someone to watch her. The private investigator's report landed in my email 2 weeks later with dozens of photos. Karen entering Dr. Harmon's private residence, not his office. The two of them at a hotel outside the city. A particularly devastating series capturing their intimate lunch at a restaurant where I'd proposed to her 7 years earlier. The final image was a document, a partially visible legal paper on Dr. Harmon's desk that the PI had managed to photograph through the window. Though incomplete, the visible words psychological evaluation and divorce proceedings told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a case against me. "I don't know what you're talking about," Karen said, her voice steady despite the color draining from her face. Dr. Harmon recovered more quickly. "This is exactly the kind of paranoid ideation I've been documenting." "Karen!" He turned to me with practiced concern. "Michael, making unfounded accusations of infidelity is a serious manifestation of your trust issues. The fact that you would sexualize your wife's therapeutic relationship this way is deeply troubling." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the coffee table between us. "Let's not do this dance. I have photos of you together going back 3 months. I have recordings of Karen leaving our house at 2 a.m. to meet you. And most importantly, I said, meeting my wife's eyes directly, "I have a copy of the psychological evaluation you're preparing for our divorce proceedings." Dr. Harmon's professional demeanor faltered for just a moment. "Whatever you think you have—" "David, stop," Karen interrupted, suddenly dropping the concerned wife act. She straightened in her seat, a calculating look replacing the faux sympathy. "He knows." The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the vulnerable woman who had pleaded for marriage counseling, replaced by someone coolly assessing the situation like a chess player whose gambit had been unexpectedly countered. "How long?" I asked. "With David? About 10 months. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. The therapy idea came later, when we realized what an opportunity it presented. An opportunity to gaslight me into believing I was mentally unstable while you positioned yourself to take half my company in the divorce. The calm in my voice surprised even me. Dr. Harmon cleared his throat. The psychological evaluation was merely precautionary. Your work habits and disconnection from reality represented genuine concerns. I laughed. My disconnection from reality built a $40 million company. I'm guessing that's the reality you're most interested in connecting with, isn't it, Doctor? Karen leaned forward. You neglected me for years, Michael. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? Consequences, sure. Calculated manipulation is something else entirely. I stood up, suddenly unable to breathe the same air as them. I'll have my lawyer contact you both. I suggest you retain counsel, Dr. Harmon. The ethics board tends to frown on therapists who fuck their patients' spouses while constructing fraudulent psychological evaluations. His face paled. You have no proof of... I've recorded every session for the past month, I bluffed, watching his expression crumble. And my PI has been thorough. Very thorough. As I headed for the door, Karen called after me, her voice losing its cool edge. Michael, wait. We should talk about this rationally. I turned back one last time. You've had me talking rationally about our issues for 6 months while systematically betraying me. I think we're done talking. The next 48 hours passed in a blur. I moved into a hotel, contacted my lawyer, and focused on finalizing the funding round before news of my personal disaster could spook the investors. By the time Karen's lawyer reached out, I had secured the company's future and begun fortifying my own. What I hadn't expected was the text from an unknown number that arrived on the third day. Need to talk, not what you think. Meet me? D.H. Dr. Harmon, wanting to meet outside the presence of lawyers, seemed both foolish and suspicious. Yet curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to a public location, a busy coffee shop downtown where my PI could easily observe from a distance. He was already waiting when I arrived, looking significantly less polished than in his office. The designer glasses were gone, replaced by older frames. His expensive watch was absent. He'd aged years in days. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat across from him. "I know you have every reason to refuse." "I'm listening," I said coldly, "but make it quick." He glanced around nervously before leaning forward. "What if I told you Karen was blackmailing me?" I stared at him, searching for the manipulation. "That's not the impression I got from seeing you together." "The affair was real," he admitted, his voice low. "It was stupid and unethical, and I'll lose my license when this comes out. But the psychological evaluation, that wasn't my idea. You expect me to believe she forced you to fabricate medical records?" He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table. "Listen for yourself." I put the phone to my ear cautiously. Karen's voice came through clearly. "I don't care about your ethical concerns, David. You'll write the evaluation, exactly as we discussed, or your wife finds out about us. And Dr. Collins at the licensing board, isn't she an old friend of your wife's? Imagine how interested she'd be in our sessions." Dr. Harmon's recorded voice sounded strained. "This is going too far. I agreed to help you get what you deserve in the divorce, but diagnosing him with delusions he doesn't have, he's paranoid. And controlling," Karen cut in. "You've seen it yourself. He's stressed and overworked. That's not the same as a psychiatric condition." "It is if you say it is. That's the beauty of psychiatric diagnoses, David. They're so subjective." The recording ended, and I looked up to find Harmon watching me with a mixture of shame and pleading. "Why show me this now?" I asked, pushing his phone back toward him. "Because she's escalating. Yesterday she told me the evaluation wasn't enough, that I needed to testify you made violent threats during our sessions." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I never meant for it to go this far. You just meant to sleep with my wife and help her divorce me," I said flatly. "How noble?" "I deserve that," he acknowledged. "But I'm telling you, she's not just after your money, she wants to destroy you." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What does she have against you that's worth risking your entire career?" He looked away. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it," I insisted. "If you want my help getting her off your back, I need the full story." Harmon was silent for a long moment before responding. "Karen was never just a client's wife to me. We knew each other before, in college. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. She specifically sought you out as our therapist." He nodded miserably. "We reconnected through social media about a year ago. One conversation led to another, and soon we were meeting for coffee, talking about old times. And she told you all about her neglectful workaholic husband," I filled in. "She painted a picture of emotional abandonment," he confirmed. "Said you were controlling her finances, isolating her from friends. By the time we started sleeping together, I'd convinced myself I was rescuing her." I thought back to our early therapy sessions, how Karen had demurely described her loneliness while I worked long hours. How different that was from the calculating woman I'd glimpsed in his office after the confrontation. "When did you realize she was lying?" "About 3 months ago. I ran into a colleague who knows you through the tech industry. His description of you didn't match Karen's at all." Harmon looked genuinely troubled. I started paying closer attention to the discrepancies in her stories. Then I found something on her laptop when she left it open at my place. "What?" "A document, detailed notes on you, your habits, your reactions, phrases you commonly use when stressed, like she was studying you." He shuddered visibly. "There were notes about how to guide our therapy sessions to elicit specific responses from you. The methodical nature of it chilled me. This wasn't just an affair or an opportunistic grab for my money. This was something calculated on a level I couldn't yet comprehend. "And now you're afraid of her," I observed. "You should be too," he said quietly. "The recording I played you, she has similar ones of me, agreeing to falsify records, discussing our affair. She's been documenting everything. So we're both being played," I said, a humorless smile crossing my face. "What exactly do you want from me?" "Help me expose her without destroying myself completely," he said bluntly. "In return, I'll come clean about the evaluation and our affair. I'll tell the truth in the divorce proceedings." I studied him, this broken man who had participated in betraying me and was now seeking salvation. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let him face the consequences of his actions. But the strategist in me recognized an opportunity. "I'll need copies of everything you have," I said finally. "The recordings, any emails, text messages between you. And I'll need a full written statement about how this began, including Karen's initial approach to you." Relief washed over his face. "Yes, anything. I can have it to you by tonight." "One more thing," I added, standing to leave. "Why did she target me, really? We had problems, but this level of calculation suggests something beyond a neglected wife seeking revenge." Harmon looked uncomfortable. "I don't know for certain, but there was a name she mentioned a few times when she thought I wasn't paying. Attention! Someone called Alexis." The name hit me like a thunderbolt. "Alexis Chen?" His eyes widened in recognition. "Yes, that sounds right. Who is she?" I was already gathering my things, mind racing. "My former business partner. Karen and I met at her party. Is that significant?" "Potentially," I said, not wanting to reveal more until I could verify my sudden suspicion. "Send me everything tonight. And Harmon, if you're playing me too, I'll make sure you never practice again. Anywhere." He nodded. The threat understood. As I left the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "We need to talk. Come home tonight. Just you and me." Perfect timing. She didn't know yet that her accomplice had turned. I drove home that evening with a strange sense of calm. The PI had verified Harmon's story. He'd sent a comprehensive file of evidence showing Karen's manipulation of both of us. More importantly, I'd made a phone call that had confirmed my suspicion about the Alexis connection. Karen was waiting in the living room, dressed in the blue silk top I'd always loved, hair perfectly styled, makeup subtle but flawless. The scene was carefully arranged, right down to the 2 glasses of my favorite whiskey on the coffee table. She'd even put on the playlist from our early dating days. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice a practiced blend of remorse and warmth. "I think we got off on the wrong foot the other day." "You mean when I caught you and my therapist planning to declare me mentally unstable for financial gain?" I kept my tone light as I took a seat across from her, ignoring the offered drink. She flinched slightly but recovered quickly. "It wasn't like that, Michael. David took advantage of my vulnerability. He suggested the psychological angle when I mentioned divorce." "Interesting," I mused. "He tells a different story." A flash of something, anger, fear, crossed her face before she composed herself. "Of course he would blame me. He's trying to save his career." "And what are you trying to save, Karen?" She leaned forward, allowing the silk top to gape slightly, a move I'd once found irresistible. "Our future, if possible. A clean break, if not." "Clean for whom?" I asked. "Your initial divorce filing asks for half my company shares, the house, and substantial alimony, based on a psychological evaluation calling me delusional and potentially dangerous." "The lawyer got carried away," she said dismissively. "I'm willing to be reasonable. 30% of the shares, the house, and reduced alimony, in exchange for keeping the details of our private struggles private." She was still trying to negotiate, still believed she had leverage. It would almost be admirable if it weren't so calculated. "Before I consider any offer," I said, reaching for the untouched whiskey and setting it aside, "I need to understand something." "Why Alexis Chen? What does she have to do with this?" The name landed like a slap. Karen's carefully constructed facade cracked just for a moment, revealing something hard and cold beneath. Alexis is irrelevant, she said too quickly. An old acquaintance. More than that, I think. I held her gaze steadily. You see, I called Alexis today. We had a very illuminating conversation about the startup she and I founded together 5 years ago. The one I bought her out of before it became successful. Karen's fingers tightened around her whiskey glass. She also mentioned knowing you, I continued. Not just casually, as you've always implied, but as former roommates. Close friends, even. Until some falling out in your final year of college. Ancient history, Karen murmured. But the tension in her body told another story. Here's what I find fascinating, I pressed on. You and I met at Alexis's housewarming party 7.5 years ago, 6 months after I bought her out of the company for what now seems like a pittance. You pursued me quite actively, as I recall? I fell in love with you, she said, an edge entering her voice. Is that a crime? Not at all. It's the timing that interests me, and the fact that you and Dr. Harmon were also college acquaintances, something neither of you thought to mention during 6 months of therapy. I leaned forward. That's quite a coincidence. Karen set down her glass carefully. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You and Alexis were close until you had a falling out. You specifically pursued me after I bought her out of what would become a very valuable company, and when that company was on the verge of a major valuation jump, you orchestrated an elaborate scheme to claim half of it in a divorce. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. The question is whether you did this on your own, or if you and Alexis reconciled over a shared desire for revenge. Her laugh sounded brittle. That's quite a conspiracy theory, Michael. Maybe Dr. Harmon was right about those paranoid tendencies. Instead of responding, I pressed play on the recording. Alexis's voice filled the room. I can't believe he finally caught on. You were supposed to be smarter than this, Karen. Then Karen's voice, clearly agitated. It's a minor setback. I still have the psychological evaluation. With the right judge, a setback. He knows about you and the therapist. The whole plan was for you to present as the perfect, supportive wife while building the mental instability case. Now you look like a cheating manipulator. I can salvage this. Michael's still invested in the marriage. If I play vulnerable, suggest the therapist took advantage, it's too risky. We need to move to Plan B. Take the settlement I described, and walk away. 30% is still... I've put 3 years into this. Karen's recorded voice was sharp with frustration. I'm not settling for less than half just because... I stopped the recording and found Karen staring at me, her beautiful face transformed by cold fury. You recorded my private calls, she said, her voice dangerously soft. No, I corrected her. Alexis recorded your calls. She's been documenting your conspiracy for months as insurance in case you decided to cut her out of your windfall. Karen's eyes widened. She gave you the recordings? Why would she? Because I offered her something better than revenge, I said simply. A legitimate second chance at the company, a board seat, public acknowledgement of her early contributions. All she had to do was give me everything she had on you and your scheme. You're bluffing, Karen said, but her confidence was visibly shaken. Alexis would never betray me like that. The same way you'd never betray me? I smiled without humor. Honor among thieves is a myth, Karen. Alexis made a business decision. You should understand that better than anyone. I stood up, no longer interested in prolonging the conversation. My lawyer will contact yours tomorrow with a settlement offer. Given the evidence of conspiracy and fraud, I think you'll find it quite generous. The alternative is criminal charges. You wouldn't dare, she hissed, all pretense of reconciliation abandoned. I'll tell everyone how you ignored me for years, how you were emotionally abusive. Save the performance. I cut her off. It might have worked on me once when I trusted you. When I believed you actually loved me at some point. I headed for the door. then turned back one last time. The saddest part? I would have given you anything if you'd just been honest. If any part of our marriage had been real. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen seemed at a loss for words. As I walked out of what had once been our home, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The life I had believed in was a carefully constructed illusion, but seeing through it finally set me free. 18 months later, I sat across from the real Dr. Leslie Morgan, watching as she reviewed my file with thoughtful consideration. "So the divorce is finally settled?" she asked, setting down her notes. I nodded. "Signed and finalized last week. Karen took the revised settlement rather than face fraud charges. The company is intact and moving forward. And Dr. Harmon surrendered his license voluntarily as part of a confidential agreement with the ethics board. He provided a full statement, clearing me of any psychological issues." I shrugged. "Last I heard, he's teaching high school psychology somewhere in Oregon." Dr. Morgan studied me with genuine professional concern, so different from Harmon's calculated observations. "And how are you processing all of this? Finding out your marriage was essentially a long con has to leave emotional scars." I considered her question carefully. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing that I missed signs that should have been obvious. I'm supposed to be smart. I built a successful company by identifying patterns, seeing things others miss. But in my personal life, I was completely blind. "We're all vulnerable to believing what we want to believe," she offered, "especially from those we love." "That's just it," I said, the revelation still fresh. I don't think I did love her. Not really. I loved the idea of her, the carefully crafted version she presented. I never knew the real Karen. "And now? Are you ready to trust again?" I smiled ruefully. "I verify more and trust less. But yes, I'm getting there, building connections that are based on something authentic, even if imperfect." As our session wrapped up, I stepped out into the bright afternoon. Sunlight, my phone buzzing with messages from the office. The company was thriving, expanding into new markets, with Alexis back on the team, her technical brilliance complementing my business vision just as it had in the beginning. My personal life was simpler now, a downtown apartment without memories of betrayal. Friendships that had been tested and strengthened by crisis. Even a few tentative dates with people who seemed refreshingly straightforward. The experience had changed me, certainly. I'd learned that the most elaborate deceptions aren't executed by strangers, but by those closest to us. That sometimes the people who claim to love us are merely playing roles in a script we don't know exists. That trust, once shattered, rebuilds, itself in different patterns, but I'd also discovered my own resilience. The capacity to face a devastating truth and still move forward. The ability to distinguish between healthy skepticism and paralyzing distrust. As I headed back to the office, I reflected on what real therapy, not the weaponized version I'd experienced, had taught me. Sometimes losing what we thought we had opens the door to finding something authentic, something true, and truth, however painful, is always preferable to the most comforting lie.